003, she didn't say Melania's name, but one question from Jasmine Crockett shook the entire White House and exposed the double standard America's been ignoring for decades. It started with the usual noise of a Capitol Hill hearing, paper shuffling, tired voices, political theater. But when Representative Jasmine Crockett leaned into her microphone that Thursday morning, the air in room 2141 of the Rayburn House office building changed. The topic was immigration reform. Again. 037, most of it had been dry, Republicans talking about law and order, Democrats pushing for family protections. Cameras panned across yawning interns and stone-faced committee members. But Crockett wasn't here to play nice. She adjusted her blazer, stared straight ahead, and spoke slowly. If we're going to deport undocumented spouses for breaking visa rules, she paused, then dropped it. Do we start with the First Lady? Silence. Not the kind that's polite. The kind that feels like someone just knocked over the table. 3 seats to her left, Representative Glenn Bradbury blinked hard, lips parted like he couldn't believe she'd actually said it. On the Republican side, murmurs bubbled into a quiet rustle, papers being picked up, a hand covering a cough that might have been a laugh. 124, C-SPAN's closed captioning feed caught up 5 seconds later. Phones vibrated in the audience. A staffer from Nebraska looked up from her laptop with wide eyes and mouthed, "Did she just say Melania?" Crockett didn't repeat it. She didn't need to. She sipped water, looked down at her notes, and let the moment linger. Representative Paul Gentry, chairing the session, cleared his throat like he'd swallowed a pebble. 149, let's keep the discussion respectful, he muttered, half to Crockett, half to the cameras. But it was too late. The cameras had it. The internet added. In the back row, a freelance journalist named Lex Torres was already tweeting. He didn't quote her directly, he didn't have to. He just wrote, Crockett just threw a grenade in the room. Do we start with the First Lady? 210, it took 13 minutes for that hashtag to start trending, less than 2 hours for it to hit national headlines. But inside the room, the aftermath was quieter. Gentry tried to move on, called on another representative from Arizona, but even he was thrown off, stumbling through his statement on visa quotas. Jasmine Crockett didn't smile. She wasn't gloating. If anything, she looked tired. Focused. She'd planned that line, probably rehearsed it in front of the mirror, knowing exactly what it would do. 2:30, Representative Molly Kincaid, a Democrat from Oregon, leaned over to her and whispered, "They're about to explode." Crockett gave a dry reply without turning her head, "Good." Across the aisle, Bradbury scribbled something onto a notepad, ripped the page out, and handed it to his aide. Moments later, a Republican staffer slipped out the side door, his phone already at his ear. Because if Crockett had crossed the line, the party needed to decide quickly, was it worth responding, or would that just draw more attention to the thing nobody wanted to talk about? 3:14, nobody. Until now. Outside the building, reporters were already crowding the steps. Lex Torres was on a live stream. She didn't name names, he said, but we all know who she meant. And look, we've all seen the reports about Melania's visa issues. Nobody brings it up because, well, he shrugged, now they will. Inside, the hearing limped on, but the atmosphere had changed. Words hit different. Even the dry policy stuff sounded sharper, like everyone knew something big had just been dropped. But nobody was allowed to say it out loud again. 3:36, Jasmine left the room 10 minutes later, walking straight down the corridor with her team. She wasn't answering questions. At least not yet. But she didn't look rattled. She looked like someone who had finally said the thing everybody else had tiptoed around for years. But while she walked calmly out of that hearing room, a storm was already starting to build inside the West Wing. The hearing had ended less than an hour ago when it hit. Inside the private dining room off the Oval Office, Donald Trump stood behind a chair, gripping the top of it so hard his knuckles turned pale. The flat screen mounted on the wall replayed Jasmine Crockett's now viral moment on a loop, the closed captioning bold and slow, "Do we start with the First Lady?" 4:19, Trump didn't blink. He didn't sit. He didn't even yell at first. He just stared at the screen like it had personally insulted him. Hope Daniels, one of his senior advisors, stepped forward. "We're drafting a press response. Just a quick." "Don't write anything," he snapped, eyes still locked on the screen. This woman just said my wife should be deported. She said that in front of the world. 4:42, Daniels froze. The room was packed. Chief of Staff Vic Marino, Press Secretary Carla McNair, Communications Deputy Ruddy Finch, and a legal advisor nobody even knew by name. Everyone looked around like they were waiting for someone else to jump in. Trump finally turned around. Where the hell was Paul Gentry? He should have shut that down. Where is he? He tried, sir, McNair said. He called for order. 5:02, Trump raised his voice. Not order. He should have kicked her out. Suspended her. Something. They'd suspend a Republican for saying something like that. There was a pause. Nobody wanted to remind him that Crockett hadn't actually named Melania. Not out loud. That kind of correction could cost a job. She said, First Lady, Trump growled, answering his own thought. She meant Melania. She didn't have to say her name. Everyone knows. 5:25, Carla McNair glanced at Vic Marino, who gave her a look that said don't, but Trump was pacing now. They think I won't respond. They think I'll let that slide. I'm not letting that slide. You get the GOP heads on the phone. Gentry, Hollins, Govish. I want a coordinated response before the 6 o'clock news cycle. 5:45, Daniels moved toward her phone, but Trump held up a hand. No, wait. We don't just respond. We go big. Full court press. Interviews. Op-eds. I want somebody writing that this was a disgrace. That she should be censured. He paused again, then asked, Can we censure her? Marino spoke up cautiously. Technically, yes. But it has to go through the House Ethics Committee. 6:07, and start it, Trump barked. Get the paperwork. Make her feel it. They want to come for my wife, we come for their seats. Daniels looked up from her phone. Sir, respectfully, if we push too hard, we risk bringing more attention to Melania's immigration story. It's already trending. 6:32, Trump turned toward her slowly. What do you mean trending? She tapped the screen and turned it toward him. The top posts on X, formerly Twitter, all read, #deport your migrant wife, #Melania visa sitch, #Crockett was right. One post had 500,000 views in 30 minutes. Another was a clip from an old interview with Melania on Larry King Live where she dodged a question about how she first worked in the U.S. 6:54, Trump's face twisted. Find those people. Every damn one of them. I want accounts suspended, reported, shut down. I don't care how. Nobody moves. They're dragging my wife through the mud and we're just sitting here. McNair tried to calm the situation. We can brief Melania, get her a quiet sit-down interview. Frame this like a personal attack. 7:22, no, he snapped. She's not doing press. They don't deserve her voice. We'll speak for her. But. I said no. He slammed a hand down on the table. Water glasses jumped. The room fell silent again. Daniels cleared her throat. Okay. So we coordinate a defense. Issue statements from allies, flood media with counterpoints. 7:43, Trump nodded, slower this time. Good. But make it personal. Not about policy. About dignity. These people don't get to smear a woman who came here legally. Say that. Vic Marino leaned forward. Are you sure we want to push the legality angle? It might open the door to old visa questions. Trump stared at him. I say it, he repeated. Say it. 8:07, outside the West Wing, reporters were already setting up on the North Lawn. Questions about immigration had taken a sudden, sharp turn. And inside, the tone had shifted from panic to strategy, not because the rage had faded, but because now it had direction. But even as the White House prepared to fight back, there was one thing they couldn't control. The American public was already forming its own opinion. 8:29, by the time the evening news rolled around, every major outlet had the same lead story, but different tones. Some called Crockett's comment reckless, others called it bold. But the thread running through all of them was a sudden re-examination of something the Trump White House had hoped was long buried, Melania Trump's immigration timeline. The irony wasn't lost on anyone. The administration had built its political brand on harsh immigration policies, but now the First Lady's own past was being questioned in the same breath as those she supposedly stood against. 8:54, cable news anchors rolled the clip on loop, cutting between Jasmine Crockett's moment and grainy images from early 2000s photo shoots featuring a much younger Melania in New York. The contrast was jarring. And people were asking, how exactly did she go from Slovenian model to U.S. citizen? 9:15, by 9 p.m., independent journalist Clive Renshaw had already dug up archived interviews and press releases. He laid it out plainly on his live stream. Melania came to the U.S. in 1996. She says she had the right visa, but we know she did paid modeling work before getting a proper work visa. That's a violation. Small, sure. But under current policy, it's still a violation. And if she weren't First Lady, would that have gotten her deported? 9:40, his chat exploded. Asterisk double standard. She broke the rules. They'd deport any other immigrant for that. Asterisk on Reddit, users were posting scanned screenshots from a 2016 investigative report by Politico that had raised the same question back during the campaign. Back then it got brushed aside. But now it was everywhere. 10:07, talk radio ran hot with it. On a conservative show out of Amarillo, Texas, the host grumbled, "This is just the left attacking a classy woman because she married a man they hate." But even he paused when a caller asked, if she broke the law, why doesn't she have to face consequences? The host stammered, then changed the subject. 10:31, that night, Fox ran a short segment defending Melania, calling the attack petty and irrelevant. But CNN and MSNBC went deeper. They invited former immigration attorneys who'd been forced to defend immigrants facing deportation for technical infractions far smaller than what Melania was now being accused of. One former ICE lawyer said, "I've seen mothers deported for using the wrong social security number to get a cleaning job. We're talking about a double standard here that's painful for millions." 10:54, people started sharing their own stories. In Phoenix, Arizona, a mother of two filmed a TikTok from her kitchen table. Her husband had been deported in 2022 for overstaying his visa by 6 weeks after getting laid off during COVID. "I just want to know," she said, holding back tears, "why my kids lost their father over a technicality, but Melania gets to stay First Lady like none of it matters." That clip hit 10 million views in a day. 11:15, the next morning, newspapers picked it up. The St. Louis Sentinel ran a front-page headline, "Who deserves a second chance?" and in smaller print beneath it, "If Melania Trump gets one, why don't we?" The White House tried to push back. Press Secretary Carla McNair held a shaky briefing in which she called the allegations baseless and already settled. When pressed on which visa Melania first entered on, she danced around it. "I won't speak on personal legal matters from 30 years ago," she said. 11:40, that only added fuel. Because now this wasn't just about one woman's visa story. It was about the larger question the administration had never wanted to face: how do you justify deporting people for mistakes your own family made? The timing couldn't have been worse. ICE had just announced a new round of raids in California. Images of crying children, locked apartments, and frightened workers were already circulating. And Melania? She remained silent. No statement. No tweet. No appearance. Which only made people speculate more. 12 o'clock, on a podcast recorded out of Columbus, Ohio, political strategist Celine Ward said it bluntly, "This isn't about whether Melania deserves to be deported. Of course she doesn't. But the question is, why does she get grace and others don't?" But while the country debated fairness, Jasmine Crockett was preparing to speak again. And this time, she wasn't going to leave anything unsaid. 12:21, it started with one clip, 13 seconds long. But within 24 hours, it had been sliced, captioned, remixed, and sent flying across the internet like wildfire in a dry canyon. The hashtag #DeportYourMigrantWife hit #1 on X by midnight, climbing past celebrity gossip and international headlines. Influencers reposted it. Immigration activists reshared it. Even political opponents who had never heard of Jasmine Crockett suddenly knew her face, her voice, and the exact tone she used when she said, "Do we start with the First Lady?" 12:41, but it wasn't just activists and journalists now. A high school teacher in Burbank filmed a reaction video during her lunch break. A cashier in Wichita made a TikTok explaining how her uncle got deported over a late form. On YouTube, entire channels emerged overnight dissecting Melania Trump's visa journey like a forensic crime scene. 13:05, and the reactions weren't all on one side. Conservative voices pushed back hard. Talk show host Wyatt Rucker went on a 10-minute tirade accusing Crockett of launching an unprovoked assault on a graceful woman who came here legally. His rant got clipped and shared, too, but not in the way he'd hoped. The internet zeroed in on one line: Melania's story is different. She married a successful American, and that makes all the difference. 1336, people didn't let that slide. Comment sections lit up. So marriage erases the rules. Tell that to every immigrant couple I know torn apart. My sister married a citizen and still got deported. Even late-night comedians joined in. On the Steve Ramirez show, the host opened his monologue with, "So apparently, if you break immigration laws but marry a billionaire, it's patriotic. If you break the law to feed your family, it's criminal." Makes total sense. Laughter, applause, then a serious moment of silence before Ramirez added, "This isn't a joke for everyone. Some people lost everything over this double standard." That line got clipped, too, and shared over and over again. 14:05, but what made the storm even stronger was how personal it became. People weren't just commenting, they were confessing. One man posted a photo of his mother with a caption that read, "She was deported in 2007. Visa error. No criminal record. No second chance. Melania gets to keep a platform." We got silence. Stories like that poured in, thousands of them. Suddenly, what started as a political jab became a mirror. A painful one. 14:27, the comment sections grew emotional. People described the fear of being pulled from their homes, the humiliation of courtrooms, the ache of missing birthdays and weddings. And in between the heartbreak were constant comparisons to Melania's past, especially the modeling gigs she allegedly worked before her visa allowed it. On Instagram, a DACA recipient named Maribel put it best. She posted a photo of herself holding a stack of immigration paperwork with the caption, $3,000,7 background checks, 4 years waiting, and I still don't know if I get to stay. But sure, let's not question the First Lady, 14:48, it was raw, real, and it stung. Even journalists who usually kept their opinions close began to crack. CNN's Thomas Wellings, reporting live from D.C., shook his head during a segment and said, "It's hard to tell struggling families they don't qualify when the First Lady's story has this many gaps." 15:20, still, there were those who said it had gone too far. Calls to "leave Melania alone" came from moderate celebrities, even a few Democrats. A letter published in the Hartford Register read, "We can question policy without dragging a woman who's not an elected official through the mud," but others pushed back. "She is the symbol of this administration's rules," one reader wrote in response. "If she gets a pass, we need to talk about who doesn't." 15:39, and while the country debated that question, one thing was becoming clearer by the hour: this wasn't dying down. It was getting bigger. More voices, more stories, more comparisons. What Jasmine Crockett said had touched a nerve. And now it was too late to pretend the nerve wasn't exposed. But while the online world kept roaring, Crockett herself was sitting quietly in a hotel room in Baltimore, about to break her silence. And she wasn't planning to hold anything back. 16:02, Jasmine Crockett sat on the edge of a hotel bed in downtown Baltimore, legs crossed, scrolling through hundreds of mentions, tags, and message requests. Her team was huddled in the adjoining room, trying to decide if going forward with the interview tonight was a mistake or a moment of opportunity. She could hear bits of the conversation through the thin wall. She poked the hornet's nest, her press aide muttered. And the hornets are billionaires with media connections. But Jasmine wasn't shaken. Not now. Not after everything she'd read over the last 24 hours. Because somewhere between the death threats, the right-wing radio slander, and the cable news clips calling her disrespectful, she'd read a message from a woman in Fresno, "My dad got deported in 2019 after 27 years in the U.S. Your words made me feel like someone finally saw us. Thank you." That stuck with her. 16:24, the hotel room smelled like old coffee and industrial carpet cleaner. The makeup artist powdered her forehead. Her stylist adjusted the blazer. And as the clock ticked closer to 7 p.m., Jasmine's phone buzzed again, this time with a message from a member of the Congressional Black Caucus, * you're not wrong. Just be ready for the firestorm, * she already was. Across town, cameras were being set up in a studio for a primetime sit-down with Latrice Greer on Nation Talk Tonight. It wasn't a softball show. Latrice was sharp, fast, and not shy about calling out her own party. But Crockett had picked her for a reason. She wanted a real conversation, not a pre-scripted apology. 16:24, when the red light blinked on, Greer didn't waste time. "Congresswoman," she began, "last night you lit a match. People are calling you courageous, reckless, everything in between. Let's go straight to it. Did you mean to suggest that the First Lady of the United States should be deported?" Crockett didn't blink. "What I meant," she said, "is that we can't keep enforcing immigration rules with cruelty and technicality on one group of people while pretending those same rules don't apply to the powerful." 17:26, Greer leaned in. "You could have made that point 100 ways. Why this one?" "Because people ignore the truth when it's comfortable," Crockett said, her voice even. "But they get real quiet when the truth hits too close. I wasn't attacking a woman. I was exposing a system." Greer nodded slowly. "You didn't say her name, but you knew who people would think of." "I did," Jasmine replied. "And you know what? That silence that fell after I said it, that was truth-landing. Nobody in that room had a defense. They just didn't want the conversation to happen." 17:52, the interview aired live, uncut, and within minutes clips began surfacing everywhere. Her most quoted line came right after Greer asked if she regretted her choice of words. Crockett didn't hesitate. * No one gets a free pass just because their husband lives in the White House. * That became a rallying cry for some and a target for others. By morning, the backlash had sharpened. Fox News ran segments accusing her of demeaning the office of the First Lady. House Republicans drafted a letter requesting formal censure. One conservative commentator went so far as to call her un-American. But Crockett didn't waver. She tweeted simply, "If speaking truth makes me un-American, then what does that make the people deporting families over paperwork?" That one went viral, too. 1814, and behind the scenes, some Democrats were getting nervous. One senior member of the party reportedly said during a closed-door meeting, "I agree with her in principle, but the optics are a nightmare." To which another, younger rep replied, "Maybe it's time we stop worrying about optics and start worrying about people." In public, the reaction was split, but loud. At a rally in Cleveland, a crowd chanted Crockett's name and held up signs with their loved ones' immigration cases written across them. But in Jackson, Mississippi, a small group of protesters waved American flags and signs that read "Respect the First Lady" in bold red paint. 1844, Crockett stayed focused. She appeared on one more talk show that week. When asked what her end goal was, she said, "I want fairness. I want the same mercy and patience given to those in power to be given to those without it. And I want people to see the system for what it is, rigged for the few." But while her words resonated with many, they also kicked the door wide open. And now the GOP had no choice but to walk through it. 1908, the room was cold, sterile in that way all high-security spaces are, no windows, no phones, just a long oak table surrounded by worn suits and tight jaws. This wasn't the public-facing GOP. This was behind closed doors, off the record, and very much the kind of conversation Republicans often used for these kinds of meetings, the kind that weren't meant to be caught on camera or overheard by interns. 1937, at the head of the table sat Russell Crane, House Majority Leader. He didn't speak right away, just looked around at the faces of senior strategists, communications directors, and the heads of various conservative PACs. "This is a mess," he said finally, flat and low. "And I want to know how we're going to clean it up." Someone cleared their throat. Pete Farnell, a senior media strategist who'd worked every election since Reagan, spoke. "Sir, if I may," Crockett took a swing. "But we gave her the bat. We've ignored the Melania question for years. Now it's out. People aren't buying the double standard." 2000 hours, Crane shook his head. "We don't need to win Twitter. We need to control the damn narrative." Kendra Lem, deputy chair of Outreach, tapped her pen on a legal pad. "The far right wants blood. They want her censured, or at least dragged through a few news cycles. But independents, they're conflicted. The numbers are moving. She turned a sheet toward Crane. In the last 48 hours, we've seen a 6-point dip in support from suburban women. They're not mad about Crockett's tone. They're asking why nobody ever explained Melania's story in the first place. 2022, Crane leaned back, exhaling hard. Do we have anything to shut that down? Anything concrete? That's when Dominic Raine, legal advisor for the party's Ethics Review Committee, spoke up. No paperwork violations have ever been confirmed publicly. Melania's lawyers handled everything before the 2016 campaign really picked up. We've never released the documents because, well, we didn't need to. Until now. 2043, Crane narrowed his eyes. What are you saying? Raine hesitated. If we release the documents now, we might calm the storm. But if there's even a technical slip in there, it could backfire. Hard. Silence. Farnell jumped in again. Or we don't release anything. We shift the conversation. Paint Crockett as obsessed. Say she crossed a line. Frame it as an attack on dignity. Focus on her delivery, not the substance. Lem gave a tight smile. The old magician's trick. Watch this hand, not the other. 2105, Crane looked at her. Does that still work? She nodded slowly. If we act fast. They started drafting ideas on the whiteboard. Phrases that could play well on conservative outlets, attack on American women. Disrespecting the office. The politics of personal destruction, they ran through every option, sending surrogates to every morning show, leaking talking points to favored columnists, staging a press event with Melania reading to children at a library. Make her look graceful, someone said. Above the noise. 2138, but not everyone was on board. In the corner, Robert Vance, a junior congressman from Nevada, crossed his arms. What if we just answered the damn question? Crane looked at him, annoyed. What question? Whether she violated the rules. Whether it matters. People aren't asking if Crockett was rude. They're asking if she's right. The room went still for a moment. Then Crane shook his head. We don't answer traps. We steer around them. Raine added quietly, besides, if we admit to the double standard, it doesn't stop at Melania. It goes to every big donor's cousin, every campaign volunteer we helped get a waiver for. 2205, Crane snapped his fingers. Exactly. This isn't just about her. It's about the whole damn scaffolding. The meeting ran past midnight. When it ended, a coordinated plan was in motion. By the morning, GOP spokespeople flooded the airwaves with a fresh narrative. Jasmine Crockett was making immigration political, targeting women, weaponizing legality. Not a single one of them addressed Melania's visa records. They didn't have to. They were betting that the public wouldn't stay focused long enough to demand real answers. They just needed to wait out the outrage. But what they hadn't counted on was that this time, people weren't losing interest. Because the silence around Melania was becoming louder than any statement they could have made. 2230, she hadn't spoken. Not once. Not a tweet, not a statement, not even a glance toward the cameras that waited outside Trump Tower when she briefly returned to Manhattan 2 days after the hearing. Melania Trump had gone quiet. And that somehow made it worse. Reporters tracked her every step, from the moment she stepped off the private jet in Morristown to her short, guarded walk into a black SUV. Cameras zoomed in, hoping to catch an expression, anything that might suggest a response. But her face remained unreadable. Perfectly composed. Unavailable. 2255, inside the walls of her Fifth Avenue residence, the only people allowed in were longtime aides and one personal stylist. Staff reported she wasn't watching TV, but they didn't believe it. One source claimed she'd been glued to the news the first night after Crockett's comment, pacing the living room with her arms crossed and her jaw clenched tight. She knows exactly what they're saying about her, the source said. She just refuses to answer the way they want. That silence sparked even more speculation. Cable news anchors began dissecting it like it was a strategy. Some saw it as calculated, an elegant refusal to engage in the mud. Others called it tone-deaf, a failure to show empathy when millions were hurting from the same system now being questioned because of her. 2329, in a segment on Morning View, analyst Howard Leeds laid it out bluntly: her silence is not neutral. Not anymore. It sends a message, intentional or not, that she feels untouched by the same rules applied to everyone else. The host chimed in, "Isn't that the whole issue? The silence says, I'm above this. And people feel that." Meanwhile, her supporters framed the silence as dignity in the face of cruelty. Former First Lady consultant Rachel Dumont appeared on a podcast and said, "She's not a politician. She's a mother, a wife. She's not required to answer to an angry congresswoman." 2348, but that argument had less weight this time. Because while Melania had stayed quiet, thousands of immigrants across the country didn't have the luxury. On a Thursday night in El Paso, during a live CNN town hall on immigration, an audience member stood up and asked the panel, "If I said nothing during my ICE hearing, would I be treated with dignity or thrown on a plane?" No one answered. And still, Melania said nothing. 2400 hours 10, the silence spilled into her scheduled appearances. A literacy event in Tampa was cancelled. A hospital tour in New Hampshire was postponed. When asked why, a spokesperson simply said, "Scheduling conflicts." But insiders knew better. The White House didn't want her in front of microphones. Not with every journalist primed to ask about Crockett's remark and Melania's past. Some aides floated the idea of a soft interview, perhaps with a friendly outlet, maybe a carefully edited Q&A with no visa talk, just motherhood, beauty, and charity. Melania declined. "She doesn't want to explain herself," one aide said. "She doesn't feel she should have to." 2400 hours 41, and yet, the public wanted more this time. More than ever. Because while the country could forgive mistakes, it was struggling to forgive indifference. In a powerful op-ed for the Kansas City Ledger, immigration attorney Priya Seth wrote, "It's not the illegality alone that offends people. It's the silence, the privilege to ignore what others must beg to survive. That's what stings." Her words echoed across the political divide. Even some Republicans began to privately admit the silence wasn't helping. "She should have said something," one anonymous aide told Politico. Even just a few words. Something like, "I respect the immigration process." Anything but this ghost act makes it worse. 25:03, but Melania remained still. No matter how loud the noise got around her, she seemed determined not to let it reach her directly. Or maybe she was simply waiting for it to pass. Back in Washington, Jasmine Crockett noticed. She said so during an impromptu press stop outside her office. "People are bending over backward to protect this woman from answering a basic question," she said. "If I, as a black congresswoman, had even one visa error in my history, I'd be dragged through the system until my career disappeared. But Melania Trump? She gets to pretend none of this touches her." She didn't smile. She didn't raise her voice. She just shrugged. The silence says more than any of us ever could. 25:37, but while Melania remained invisible, the country was waking up. And voices once too afraid to speak were about to take center stage. In a two-bedroom apartment in Stockton, California, Rosa Alvarado sat at her kitchen table with her youngest daughter asleep on her lap. The TV was unmuted, but the headline at the bottom of the screen said it all: "Melania faces questions amid immigration debate." Rosa wasn't an activist. She wasn't even someone who liked to talk politics. She worked at a food processing plant, 12-hour shifts, 6 days a week. But when she saw Crockett's words replayed on a friend's Facebook page, she'd whispered one word out loud, finally, because her husband, Daniel, had been deported 5 years earlier. No criminal record, no warning. One expired document, an old address mismatch on a renewal form. ICE had shown up at their door before sunrise. 25:58, the image of Melania Trump arriving at fashion shows in the late 90s, working before her visa allowed it, that was hard to look past now. Rosa had spent years begging to keep her family together. No one had offered her grace. She wasn't alone. In Albuquerque, a father of 3 who'd built a successful roofing business posted a video from his driveway. "I'm not saying she should be deported," he said. "I'm saying if she were named Maria and came from Mexico instead of Slovenia, none of us would know her name. Because she wouldn't be here." The video went viral within hours. 26:18 What started as an internet debate was now a national self-examination. The country was looking at itself in the mirror and seeing two immigration systems, one harsh and rigid, the other soft and silent. Church leaders spoke up. Civil rights attorneys. Even a few retired immigration judges. In one panel on public radio, former Judge Laura Romero said, "I've had to deport teenagers for technical violations. I've cried while signing those orders. You think I wanted to? But the law doesn't bend unless you have power." 26:38 It was becoming harder for politicians to stay quiet. Constituents were calling in. Local newspapers were publishing letters from readers demanding clarity, not just on Melania's story, but on the broken system it reflected. In a town hall in Toledo, Ohio, Congressman Brent Galloway, a moderate Republican, found himself cornered by a woman who asked point-blank, "Do you support deporting spouses for minor violations?" He hesitated. "It depends on the case," he said. She fired back, "So if it's Melania Trump, it's a case. But if it's my sister, it's just policy." The room applauded. The moment made the local news. And then national. 27:02 Meanwhile, protests and vigils began cropping up across the country. But these weren't angry riots or party-driven rallies. They were quiet, dignified, families holding signs with names and dates, photos of loved ones removed from the U.S. for the same kind of infractions that Melania was now accused of skating past. In Dallas, a crowd gathered outside the courthouse with placards reading, "Where's her notice to appear? One law, one standard. Say her name. How about say her visa type, 27:21 Jasmine Crockett wasn't fueling these moments directly, but she had clearly become a symbol. Her office received thousands of emails, some furious, some supportive, many just sharing personal stories. One woman wrote, "You cracked something open. We're not going to shut it again, 27:46 Cable news tried to pivot, but the story wouldn't die. Every time someone tried to refocus attention on economic policy or overseas affairs, another viral video would pop up. Another voice saying, "I followed the rules. Why did it only work for them, Even children of immigrants were speaking out. In Sacramento, a high school senior named Isla gave a speech during her class government debate. Her mother had been denied a green card 3 times. "I was 10 years old when she was taken away," she said. "If that can happen to us, why does the First Lady get a pass? Is that what makes us American? Who we marry?" Her teacher filmed it. Her classmates shared it. CNN played the clip 3 times during a primetime segment. This wasn't just Crockett's story anymore. It wasn't Melania's, either. It belonged to the people now, the ones who had carried the weight of immigration policy quietly, privately, and with no cameras.